The first morning of basic training began with a whistle, sharp enough to cut through bone. Recruits scrambled from their bunks, bumping into one another, shouting, fumbling with boots and uniforms. Amid the chaos, Emma Cole moved like still water, silent, deliberate, calm. She made her bed with perfect hospital corners, tied her laces, and stood at attention before most of the others even found their socks. She didn't talk much. She didn't laugh. She didn't try to make friends. To the other recruits, she was a ghost drifting through the barracks. A face you noticed only when she was already gone. "Hey, Nebraska," one recruit called out during the morning run, his voice dripping with mockery. "You gonna talk to us someday, or you saving your breath for graduation?" The others laughed, and Emma said nothing. Her eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. Her stride never faltered. The instructor beside them noticed the exchange, but didn't intervene. He'd seen this before. Quiet ones got eaten alive in boot camp. But by week's end, he wasn't so sure about this particular quiet one. During weapons training, when others struggled to align their sights, Emma hit the bullseye with chilling consistency. Her breathing was steady, her hands unmoving. When the instructor called, "Cease fire," her rifle still pointed downrange, her finger never twitching on the trigger. She treated every drill as if lives depended on it. "Private Cole," the instructor finally said, walking up behind her. "You ever handled a weapon before?" "No, Sergeant," she replied softly. "Just practiced." "Practiced?" "Yes, Sergeant. Back home." That was all she said. No one knew that back home meant long evenings on a farm outside Lincoln, Nebraska, a small white house surrounded by acres of corn and silence. Her father had taught her how to fix machinery, her mother how to keep going when life got heavy. But it was her brother, Luke, who had taught her to shoot. Luke had joined the Marines when Emma was 14. She remembered the day he came home in uniform, tall, confident, proud. She had wanted to be just like him. But that dream had changed 2 years later when he didn't come home again. She kept his dog tags in her pocket even now. In the mess hall, the noise was constant. Laughter, complaints, bets about who'd wash dishes. Emma sat at the edge of the table, eating quietly, not looking up. Her plate was always clean, her tray neatly placed back in line. "Hey, ghost girl," one of the recruits shouted one night. "You ever gonna say something? Or you just mute for life?" The table erupted in laughter. Emma glanced up, her eyes steady but empty of anger. She looked at them the way one might look at a gust of wind, something that passed without mattering. "Leave her," another recruit muttered. "She's weird, man." Emma didn't respond. She simply stood, took her tray, and walked away. But the drill sergeant, watching from the far side of the room, caught that look, that stillness. He'd been in combat long enough to know the difference between someone who froze and someone who focused. Later that evening, when the recruits were dismissed, he called out, "Cole," front and center. Emma jogged over, standing tall, eyes forward. "Why so quiet?" he asked. "No reason, Sergeant." "Bullshit. You don't talk. You don't crack. You don't mess up. That's not no reason. That's purpose. You got something driving you?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "Just want to serve, Sergeant." He studied her a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Keep doing what you're doing. But listen, this world doesn't notice quiet people until they make some noise. You understand me?" "Yes, Sergeant." He smiled faintly. "We'll see if you still say that after the obstacle course tomorrow." The obstacle course was chaos, mud, ropes, shouting instructors, and the sting of exhaustion. Recruits fell face first into trenches, groaned, cursed. But Emma, she didn't slow down. She climbed, crawled, and pushed through like her body was made of steel and silence. When she crossed the finish line, Covered in mud, breathing steady, she didn't raise her hands or shout. She simply stood there, waiting for the next command. "Jesus," someone muttered. "She's a machine." But Emma wasn't a machine. She just knew what pain was, and how to move through it. That night, when the barracks went dark, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, her brother's dog tags clutched in her hand. The sound of boots scuffing and whispers faded into the hum of the air vents. In her head, she could still hear Luke's voice. "You don't need to be loud to be strong, Em. You just need to show up." She whispered to the empty room. I showed up. Weeks passed. The others grew louder, cockier. Emma remained the same. Quiet, focused, sharp. She became the one people copied during drills, though they never admitted it. During a long-distance shooting test, one recruit mocked her again. "Bet the ghost girl finally misses." Emma took a slow breath, adjusted her sight, and fired. The bullet cut through the air and punched dead center. The instructor didn't even have to check the board. "Perfect shot," he announced. Someone muttered, "Damn." The laughter stopped. From that day forward, the jokes faded. No one wanted to admit it, but respect had replaced ridicule. By graduation, her file was spotless. She had passed every test, physically, mentally, emotionally, without complaint. Her superiors noted her discipline, her uncanny composure, her reliability. But they also wrote one word in the remarks section: reserved. On graduation morning, Emma stood in formation under the flag. The sun glinted off the metal nameplate above her heart. Sergeant Reynolds, now her commanding officer, handed her the assignment papers. "You've got options," he said. "Base support, training assistant, or frontline deployment. Most recruits don't pick the third one." She scanned the page once, then looked up. "Which one's hardest?" "Frontline," he said without hesitation. "I'll take it." The sergeant studied her for a long second. "You sure? That's not Nebraska farmland out there." Emma nodded. "That's why I'm going." He handed her the papers. "Then God help anyone who underestimates you." As the ceremony ended, her fellow recruits laughed and hugged and posed for photos. Emma stood off to the side, watching quietly. The flag rippled in the wind. Somewhere deep inside her, something old and heavy began to stir. Not pride, but purpose. She didn't join the army for applause. She joined because she couldn't stand watching others sacrifice everything while she stood still. That night, as the buses rolled toward their next destinations, Emma sat by the window, watching the world blur by. The base lights faded, replaced by open sky. She reached into her pocket, feeling the cold metal of her brother's dog tags. "I'll make it mean something," she whispered. The hum of the engine filled the silence. No one noticed her leave. No one waved goodbye. But one day soon, they would all remember the name Private First Class Emma Cole, the quiet recruit who would rewrite what bravery looked like. The next phase of training was designed to break them. The recruits woke before dawn to freezing rain, mud pits, and endless shouting. Sleep was rationed like ammunition, and mistakes cost everyone extra miles. Some broke early. Some faked injuries. But Emma Cole, the quiet recruit from Nebraska, moved through it all like she had no off switch. Her body hurt. Her hands blistered. Her uniform was permanently soaked with sweat and dirt. But she never complained. Never spoke unless directly ordered to. To some, her silence was unnerving. To others, it was irritating. "Hey, ghost girl," said Private Jake Miller, tossing her canteen toward her one afternoon. "You some kind of robot? You even human under all that quiet?" Emma caught the canteen without looking up. "Human enough," she said flatly, and went back to cleaning her weapon. The small response caught everyone off guard. It was the first time she'd said more than 2 words in weeks. Miller stared at her for a moment, unsure how to react, then laughed awkwardly. Guess she does talk. But Sergeant Reynolds, the instructor who had noticed her before, didn't laugh. He watched her with the same quiet curiosity he reserved for storms on the horizon. Cole, he barked, front and center. She jumped to her feet and stood straight. You're consistent, he said. Too consistent. You know what that means? No, Sergeant. It means you're holding something back. You ever lose control, Cole? Her jaw tightened. No, Sergeant. That's not always a good thing. The battlefield doesn't give medals for calm. It gives them to those who survive and make sure others do too. You understand? Yes, Sergeant. He leaned closer. Then we're going to see how calm you stay under fire. The next day's exercise was live fire simulation, a test meant to mimic real combat conditions. Smoke bombs filled the field, machine gun fire cracked overhead, and explosions thundered as recruits crawled under barbed wire. Emma moved steadily, her movements smooth and deliberate. When one recruit froze midway through, paralyzed by fear, as rounds whizzed above them, Emma turned, grabbed him by the strap of his vest, and pulled him forward. Keep going, she said sharply. He hesitated, and a simulated explosion detonated nearby, knocking them both into the mud. Emma covered his head, shielding him until the signal whistle blew. When they returned to the line, the recruit's hands were shaking. You could have just left me. Emma wiped the mud from her face. That's not how we win. Sergeant Reynolds, watching from the tower, scribbled something in his notebook. Later, when the group gathered for debrief, he called her name. Private Cole, front. Emma stood at attention. You saved a recruit from injury today, he said. Why? She frowned slightly. Because he needed help, Sergeant. You risked your position to do it. I did what I was trained to do, Sergeant. The sergeant stared at her for a moment, then nodded. That's the right answer, and the wrong one. The recruits looked confused. He continued, Cole here isn't out here to look good. She's here to keep her team alive. That's what the Army needs. Soldiers who don't think about themselves. Take notes, the rest of you. The others murmured quietly. For the first time, the jokes about Ghost Girl faded. That night, while most recruits played cards or scrolled through their phones, Emma sat in the quiet, disassembling and cleaning her rifle by lamplight. Sergeant Reynolds approached quietly. You remind me of someone, he said. She didn't look up. Who, Sergeant? Me, he said with a half-smile. Back before the noise got to me. You know, quiet soldiers, they're dangerous. They see things others don't. Emma said nothing. He leaned against the table. You keep this up, Cole. You'll do fine out there. Might even lead one day. Her brow furrowed. Lead? He nodded. Leadership doesn't come from shouting orders. It comes from earning trust. You've already got the respect. They just don't realize it yet. Emma didn't know what to say. No one had ever suggested she could lead before. The following weeks pushed her even harder. Physical endurance. Drills, long marches, simulated combat missions. She passed them all. Her performance in marksmanship was especially remarkable. She hit her targets from distances most recruits struggled to even see. Her breathing rhythm was perfect. Inhale, exhale, squeeze. Each shot was a whisper of precision. Word began spreading around camp. You should see Cole shoot. During one session, Sergeant Reynolds handed her a long-range rifle and pointed at a steel target far downrange. Let's see what you've got. She adjusted the scope, her hand steady. Winds from the west, she murmured under her breath, adjusting slightly. Whenever you're ready, Private. Emma fired once. The sound echoed through the range. The spotter called out, Center hit. A murmur spread across the firing line. Reynolds just grinned. Remind me never to get on your bad side. That evening, A few recruits approached her in the mess hall. It was Miller again, the one who used to mock her. "Hey, Cole," he said cautiously. "Nice shooting today." She looked up, surprised. "Thanks. You ever think about joining recon?" he asked. "They could use someone like you." Emma shrugged. "I go where I'm needed." He nodded awkwardly and walked away. It wasn't friendship, but it was the beginning of something close. By the end of the training phase, Emma's reputation had changed entirely. She wasn't Ghost Girl anymore. She was Deadeye. Instructors used her example when new recruits faltered. Do it like Cole. Yet Emma remained humble. She stayed quiet, still the first to rise and the last to sleep. The pride she felt wasn't in recognition. It was in knowing her brother would have approved. One rainy afternoon, the recruits gathered in the hall for their graduation assignments. Names were called, orders distributed. Some cheered when they got postings near home. Others groaned when they heard overseas deployment. When Emma's name was called, Sergeant Reynolds handed her the envelope himself. "Private Emma Cole," he said, his tone unreadable. "Congratulations. You've been assigned to Bravo Company, 27th Infantry Regiment Forward Deployment." A few heads turned in surprise. The 27th was known for its dangerous missions in unstable regions. Emma blinked once. "Thank you, Sergeant." He lowered his voice. "That's not a thank you assignment, Cole. That's a test." She nodded. Understood. He leaned in closer. "And Cole, if you ever find yourself in the middle of hell, remember this. Being quiet isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the thing that keeps you alive." "Yes, Sergeant." That night, after packing her gear, Emma walked outside the barracks. The rain had stopped, and the air smelled like metal and earth. She sat on the steps, holding her brother's dog tags in her palm. The engraved letters caught the moonlight. L. Cole, USMC, Faith, Honor, Courage. She smiled faintly. "I'm coming, Luke. Maybe not where you were, but close enough." From the shadows behind her, Sergeant Reynolds watched her for a long moment before turning away. He had trained hundreds of recruits, but something about this one felt different. There was a stillness in her that wasn't emptiness. It was focus. And in the world she was walking into, that kind of focus could mean the difference between life and death. As the transport trucks rolled out at dawn, Emma sat in the back, her rifle across her knees, her eyes fixed on the horizon. She didn't know what waited for her out there. Only that, whatever it was, she would face it the same way she had faced everything else, quietly, completely, and without fear. In the coming months, her name would be whispered across bases, written in after-action reports, and remembered by soldiers who owed her their lives. But for now, she was still the quiet recruit, calm, ready, and about to walk into the fire. The transport plane hummed through the night sky, a low and constant vibration that rattled through metal and bone. Private First Class Emma Cole sat by the small oval window, watching the distant lightning flash over desert clouds. Around her, soldiers talked, laughed, or tried to sleep. She didn't join in. She rarely did. For the first time, she was leaving American soil not as a civilian, not as a recruit, but as a soldier bound for war. Her orders had been clear. Report to Forward Operating Base Falcon, a small, isolated U.S. Army outpost in the Syrian border region. The man beside her, Corporal Mike Tanner, nudged her shoulder. "First deployment?" "Yes," she said. He grinned. "Don't worry. You'll be fine. Nothing much happens out there. Boring, mostly." Emma turned her eyes back to the window. She had heard that before. Nothing much happens, and it never stayed true for long. The heat hit her like a wave the moment she stepped off the plane. The air shimmered, thick with dust and jet fuel. The sun glared down from a cloudless sky, baking everything in sight: vehicles, gear, skin. Soldiers bustled about the landing zone, shouting orders, loading crates, waving flags. Emma followed her unit toward the cluster of tan tents and sandbag walls that formed Phobe Falcon. The base looked less like a fortress and more like a stubborn scar on the desert's face. Inside the operations tent, Lieutenant Harris, a lean man with sharp features and the weary eyes of someone who hadn't slept in weeks, scanned the new arrivals. "Fresh meat," he said dryly. "Welcome to paradise." The soldiers chuckled. Emma didn't. Harris's gaze stopped on her. "Cole, right? The quiet one Reynolds warned me about." "Yes, sir." He smirked. "You shoot as good as he says?" "I try, sir." "Good. Try harder. We've got locals reporting insurgent movement north of our patrol routes. Intel's thin, and our comms are garbage. You'll be running recon and convoy support for the next few weeks. You keep your head down, and you'll be fine." Emma nodded. Understood. Her new squad was a mix of veterans and rookies, a few friendly faces, more skeptical ones. Among them were Corporal Tanner, who had sat beside her on the flight, Private Lopez, a loudmouth with too much energy, and Sergeant Red Daniels, a seasoned soldier with a dry wit and zero patience. "Listen, rookie," Daniels said, tossing her a pack of rations. "Out here, quiet can get you killed. You see something, you say it loud. You hear something, you say it louder. Got it?" "Yes, Sergeant." He frowned. "You always this calm?" "Yes, Sergeant." He grunted. "Great, another Zen warrior. Just don't get Zen shot." The others laughed. Emma smiled faintly, not because it was funny, but because she'd heard worse. Days turned into a rhythm of patrols and drills. The desert was both beautiful and cruel. Golden dunes by morning, bone-chilling winds by night. Every step crunched on sand that hid more danger than it revealed. Emma learned the terrain fast. She memorized landmarks, studied wind patterns, and watched how the local villagers moved. They respected her, not because she spoke their language fluently, but because she treated them with quiet dignity. She never shouted at them like some soldiers did. She listened. In return, they began to trust her. One afternoon, while her squad rested near a market road, an old man approached her with cautious eyes. He pointed north, speaking urgently in broken English. "Bad men? Coming soon." Emma's pulse quickened. She nodded and thanked him, offering one of her ration bars in gratitude. When she returned to camp, she reported it immediately. Lieutenant Harris frowned. "Intel from locals is a coin toss, Cole. Sometimes it's right, sometimes it's bait." "Understood, sir," she said. But he seemed sure. He sighed. "All right. We'll double patrol coverage north of Route Delta. Good work." As she turned to leave, he added quietly, "You don't talk much, but when you do, I'll listen." That meant more to her than he'd ever know. By the third week, routine began to blur. Patrol, report, clean, sleep. The monotony was broken only by the occasional adrenaline spike, a suspicious noise, a glint on a rooftop, a child running too fast near a convoy. Then, one evening, it happened. Emma's squad was returning from a standard perimeter patrol when the radio crackled. "Convoy 2, this is Base Command. Possible IED near Checkpoint 3. Proceed with caution." Sergeant Daniels cursed. Every damn road in this country's a minefield. They halted the Humvees. The setting sun bled orange across the sand. Emma scanned the area through her scope. Her eyes caught something, a faint wire glinting between two rocks. "Stop," she said sharply. The convoy froze. She pointed toward the rocks. "Tripwire. There's an IED buried under that ridge." Daniels moved closer, kneeling beside her. "You sure?" "Yes, Sergeant." Moments later, The bomb disposal team confirmed it. She just saved the squad. Nice catch, Cole, Daniels muttered, shaking his head. Guess being quiet has its perks. The soldiers laughed, but it was different this time. Respectful. That night, in the mess hall, the squad ate in relative peace. The usual noise filled the tent. Clattering utensils, laughter, music from someone's speaker. But every now and then, someone's gaze drifted toward Emma. Lopez finally broke the silence. So, Cole, where'd you learn to spot traps like that? She shrugged. You just learn to look where no one else does. Like, philosophically or something? Tanner joked. Emma smirked. Like survival. The group chuckled. For once, the laughter included her. Later that night, she sat outside the barracks, staring at the stars that blanketed the desert sky. The air was still, the kind of stillness that pressed against the soul. She thought of her brother again, of his letters from deployment. You never know who you'll be out here until the bullets start flying. Emma whispered. Guess I'll find out soon. Inside, Sergeant Daniels watched her from the window. There was something about her composure that unsettled him. Not fear, but certainty. The kind that comes before a storm. The storm came sooner than anyone expected. 2 nights later, the base sirens wailed through the darkness. Incoming fire. Someone shouted. Mortar screamed overhead, exploding beyond the perimeter. The ground shook, sand flew, and chaos erupted. Emma dove for cover, instinct guiding her before thought could. She gripped her rifle tight and scanned the horizon for muzzle flashes. Cole, get to the comms tent. Daniels yelled. She sprinted through the dust and fire, dodging debris. Inside the tent, operators were shouting into headsets, static cutting every word. We've got multiple impacts north side, grid 4B. One shouted. Emma grabbed the backup radio. This is Falcon, requesting counterfire coordinates, over. Static. She switched frequencies, adjusted the antenna, recalibrated, her hands steady as ever. Within seconds, she re-established contact. This is Falcon. Fire mission, grid 4B confirmed. Roger that, the voice crackled back. Outside, artillery answered with a deafening boom. The explosions walked their way north, silencing the enemy fire. When the noise faded, the base was littered with dust, scorch marks, and adrenaline. Soldiers stumbled out of bunkers, coughing and laughing nervously. Lieutenant Harris walked over, covered in dirt. Cole, that was fast thinking. You just saved half this base. She wiped her brow. Just following procedure, sir. He shook his head. Procedure doesn't move that fast. As dawn broke, the smoke thinned and light crept over the desert again. Emma sat on a sandbag wall, her face streaked with dirt, her uniform torn. Around her, the others checked damage, counted ammo, and patched tents. No one mocked her now. No one joked. Sergeant Daniels approached with a cup of instant coffee. He handed it to her. You know, for someone who doesn't talk much, you sure make a lot of noise when it counts. Emma took a slow sip, her gaze distant. Noise isn't what saves people, Sergeant. He nodded thoughtfully. Guess we'll see about that. As the sun rose higher, the base slowly returned to order, but something had changed. Emma wasn't just the quiet recruit anymore. She was the soldier everyone looked to when things got real. And soon, they'd find out just how real it could get. The desert morning was deceptively calm. The sky burned blue, unbroken by clouds. The heat shimmered off the sand like invisible waves. Private First Class Emma Cole sat in the back of the lead Humvee, double-checking her weapon and ammo. Her squad was heading north again toward a narrow valley, known locally as the Red Corridor. It was a stretch of road infamous among patrols. Ambushes, sniper attacks, improvised explosives. Everyone who went through it came back changed, if they came back at all. Sergeant Red Daniels leaned out of the vehicle window and spat dust. If Command's intel is right, we'll be in and out before breakfast. But intel's been wrong before. Always is, muttered Corporal Tanner, loading his rifle beside him. Emma didn't respond. Her eyes stayed on the terrain rolling by. Dry hills, jagged rock, endless dunes. She'd learned not to trust stillness out here. It never lasted. By 0900 hours, the convoy entered the valley. High rock walls boxed them in, narrowing the road to a single dirt path. Too quiet, Lopez murmured from the gunner's hatch. Emma's fingers tightened on her rifle. Eyes up. Watch the ridgelines. Daniels glanced at her through the rearview mirror. Nervous, Cole? She shook her head. Observant. A few soldiers laughed, breaking the tension. But Emma didn't look away from the horizon. She felt it, the prickle in the air, the pulse in her chest. Her instincts screamed that something wasn't right. Then it happened. A thunderous explosion ripped through the convoy. The second Humvee in line was thrown sideways, engulfed in fire. The shock wave slammed into the lead vehicle, shattering the windshield. Eyed. Tanner shouted. Bullets tore through the air from both sides of the valley. Echoing gunfire erupted from unseen positions among the rocks. Contact left. Contact right. Daniels bellowed, diving for cover. Emma hit the ground behind a boulder, returning fire in quick, precise bursts. Her training took over. Aim, breathe, fire, move. Chaos consumed the valley. Dust and smoke filled the air, blinding everyone. The radio crackled uselessly, static. The comms were jammed. Base, this is Falcon 2. We're under heavy fire. Request immediate support. Tanner shouted into the mic. Nothing. Daniels cursed. They've cut our signal. We're on our own. Emma scanned through her scope. Amid the haze, she spotted muzzle flashes from the northern ridge. At least 8 enemy fighters, well positioned. They're flanking. She shouted. Daniels turned to her. You sure? Yes, sir. North Ridge, 8, maybe 10 hostiles. He trusted her tone instantly. Cole, Lopez, suppress that ridge. Tanner, get that 50 cal turned north. The roar of the .50 caliber gun filled the air, shaking the ground. Emma advanced 10 meters forward, sliding into a new position behind a cracked wall. She could feel the heat of the firefight pressing against her, like the desert itself was alive. Her rifle barked 3 times. 3 targets dropped. 3 down. She called out. Lopez grinned. Damn, quiet girl's got teeth. But it wasn't enough. The enemy kept coming, moving through the rocks with deadly coordination. RPG trails streaked across the valley. One hit a Humvee, flipping it onto its side in a fireball. Emma ducked, the blast wave lifting her off her feet. Her ears rang. The world spun. She tasted sand and smoke. Through the ringing in her head, she heard Daniels shouting, Cole, you good? She forced herself up, blood running from her temple. I'm fine. Good, because we need that north ridge cleared now. She didn't hesitate. Grabbing her rifle and a handful of grenades, Emma sprinted across open ground toward the ridge. Bullets chased her feet, kicking up dirt. Cole, fall back. Tanner yelled. She ignored him. The ridge loomed ahead, a wall of rock and chaos. She ducked behind a ledge, reloading as she caught her breath. Her hands didn't shake. They never did. She remembered her brother's words again. When everyone else freezes, move. Emma moved. She climbed fast, using the jagged stones for cover. Every few seconds, she'd pop up, take a shot, and drop again. One insurgent went down, then another. She kept climbing. At the top, she crawled along the edge until she was just meters from the remaining hostiles. They hadn't seen her. They were focused on the convoy below. She pulled the pin from a grenade and lobbed it into their midst. "Fire in the hole," she whispered. The explosion tore through the ridge. Screams echoed across the valley. Emma rose from cover, firing controlled bursts. The last two enemies fell before they even turned. For a moment, there was silence, just the sound of wind through sand. Then Tanner's voice crackled through her earpiece. "Cole, what the hell did you just do?" "Cleared the ridge," she said simply. Daniels came on next. "You're insane, Cole, but damn effective. Hold position. We're pushing forward." With the ridge neutralized, the rest of the squad advanced under covering fire. The tide turned fast. By the time the smoke began to clear, the valley was silent again. Enemy fighters lay scattered among the rocks. The convoy, though damaged, was intact. Emma descended from the ridge, moving through the haze like a ghost. Her uniform was torn, her face streaked with dust and blood. Tanner met her halfway. "You just took out an entire flank by yourself." "Someone had to," she said, brushing off his shock. Daniels approached, shaking his head. "Cole, if you ever decide to talk more, make sure it's about how you pulled that off." She gave a faint smile. "There's nothing to tell, Sergeant. Just training." He chuckled. "That ain't training. That's instinct." They spent the next hour tending to the wounded and salvaging gear. 2 soldiers had minor injuries. One Humvee was beyond repair, but everyone else was alive. Lieutenant Harris's voice finally came through the radio. "Falcon 2, we lost your signal status report." Daniels replied, "Ambush neutralized. Casualties minimal. And, you're gonna want to debrief Cole when we get back." "Cole?" "Yeah, sir. She's the reason we're still breathing." Back at FOB Falcon, word spread fast. Soldiers from other units came by the mess hall just to catch a glimpse of the quiet recruit who climbed a ridge under fire. Emma tried to ignore it. She wasn't interested in fame or stories. She just wanted to do her job. But that night, as she cleaned her rifle alone by the dim light of a lamp, Sergeant Daniels sat down beside her. "You know," he began, "most soldiers freeze their first time under real fire." "You didn't?" Emma didn't look up. "I couldn't afford to." He studied her for a long moment. "You ever think maybe you're not just surviving out here? Maybe you're built for this?" She paused, her hands still. "No one's built for this, Sergeant. Some of us just adapt faster." Daniels leaned back, impressed. "Well, keep adapting. Because something tells me that wasn't the last ambush we'll see." Emma nodded slowly. She could feel it too, the shift in the air, the weight of what was coming. The valley had changed her reputation. But deep down, she knew the real test hadn't come yet. The next mission would push her beyond instinct, beyond survival, into something far more dangerous. Something that would define her forever. The desert had a way of staying silent after battle. Even the wind seemed to avoid disturbing what was left behind. The next morning, Private First Class Emma Cole stood at the edge of the valley, the same place where the air had burned with bullets just hours earlier. Now it was still. Too still. Below her, soldiers combed through debris, tagging wreckage, collecting intel, counting brass. It looked clean from a distance, but she knew what it cost. Every crater, every dark stain on the sand was a reminder that victory never came free. "Cole," Sergeant Red Daniels called, climbing up the ridge. "You planning to stand there all day?" "Just taking it in, Sergeant." He stopped beside her, squinting at the horizon. First real firefight changes people. You either come out stronger or start breaking without noticing. She nodded faintly. I'm fine. Daniel snorted. That's what everyone says before they're not. He handed her a canteen. Command wants us back at base. Lieutenant's already talking about the next patrol. Emma took a sip, her eyes still on the valley. The next patrol? Yeah. Seems the ambush wasn't random. Intel says that squad was scouting for something. Or someone. Her gaze sharpened. Us? Maybe. Harris thinks they were testing our routes, probing our response time. Emma tightened her grip on the canteen. Then they'll be back. Daniels gave her a look that said he agreed, but couldn't say it out loud. Pack up, Cole. You've earned a few hours of sleep. She turned to leave, but glanced once more at the place where she'd climbed through chaos. She didn't feel pride. Just weight, heavy and invisible. Back at Fob Falcon, the mood was different. Soldiers nodded when she passed. A few clapped her shoulder. The same people who once called her the quiet recruit now spoke her name with respect and maybe a little awe. In the mess hall, Corporal Tanner grinned as she sat down. Word is command's considering putting you in for a commendation. Emma gave a small, tired smile. I didn't do anything special. Lopez laughed. You took out a whole ridge by yourself. That's not special. That's insane. She looked down at her tray. People died, Lopez. That shut the table up. For a few seconds, only the hum of generators filled the silence. Then Tanner spoke quietly. You saved more than you lost. That counts for something. She didn't reply. Later that night, Emma cleaned her rifle in the dim glow of her bunk lamp. Every motion was precise, deliberate. It wasn't about the weapon. It was about control, routine, discipline. She thought about her brother again. His last letter before his death overseas had said, Sometimes silence is our armor, but don't let it turn into your prison. She sighed and set the rifle down. Maybe he was right, but silence was the only thing that kept her centered out here. A knock came at the door. Come in, she said. Lieutenant Harris entered, holding a folder. Cole, you're still up? Yes, sir. He placed the folder on her desk. I've got a new assignment for your squad. You're heading out at 0500. Her brow furrowed. Already? Yeah. Command wants a recon sweep north of Red Corridor. A suspected weapons cache hidden near a dried riverbed. You'll move light and fast. Minimal support. Minimal support, she repeated. Sir, we just came off a firefight. I know, Harris said quietly. But you handled yourself better than anyone out there. Daniel says you've got instincts worth trusting. She shook her head slightly. I just did my job. He smiled faintly. And that's exactly why you're the right one for this. At dawn, the squad rolled out again. The sun rose like fire behind them, casting long shadows across the desert. The convoy was smaller this time. 2 Humvees and a single MRAP for backup. The air was tense. Everyone felt it. Daniel sat in the passenger seat, rubbing the scar on his forearm. Feels wrong heading back into the same direction, he muttered. Tanner, driving, nodded. Feels like déjà vu. Emma sat behind them, silent, watching the terrain scroll by. Cole, Daniel said without turning. You got that sixth sense working today? She smirked faintly. Always, Sergeant? Lopez laughed nervously from the turret. Yeah, if Cole says duck, I'm diving before she finishes the word. The squad chuckled, but the laughter didn't stick. Everyone knew the danger of going back. By midday, they reached the dried riverbed. It looked abandoned. Cracked ground, scattered brush, a few rusted oil drums. Daniels raised his hand. Dismount. Spread out. They moved in formation, weapons ready. Emma scanned the area through her scope. Nothing. No movement, no tracks, no signs of life. Clear, Tanner called. Daniels frowned. Too clear. Emma crouched by one of the oil drums, brushing away the dust. Something metallic glinted beneath it. "Sir," she said softly, "I think I found something." Daniels knelt beside her. Together, they uncovered a small steel hatch, half buried under sand. It had markings, Cyrillic script, faded but visible. "Russian," Daniels muttered. "Old weapons cache, maybe?" Emma examined the latch. Recently opened. Daniels's jaw tightened. "They've been using this place." He motioned to Tanner. "Call it in." Tanner tried the radio. "Base, this is Falcon Team 1. We've located a possible cache." "Coordinates." The radio crackled, then died. Static. "Signal's dead again," Tanner said. Daniels cursed. "They're jamming us. Everyone, fall back to the vehicles now." But before they could move, a low thud echoed through the canyon. Dust fell from the cliffs. Then the gunfire started. Bullets tore through the air from the ridge above. Dirt exploded around them. The squad dove for cover. "Ambush!" Daniels roared. Emma rolled behind a boulder, returning fire. She counted at least 12 muzzle flashes, enemy positions surrounding them from both sides. "We're pinned." Tanner shouted. "Lopez, get that 50 cal running." Daniels ordered. "I can't," jammed. Lopez yelled back. Another explosion went off near the vehicles, flipping the MRAP. The blast wave threw Emma onto her back. Her vision blurred. When she blinked back to focus, she saw Daniels lying motionless a few meters away, blood spreading under his vest. "Sergeant!" She screamed, crawling toward him. He was breathing barely. His radio was smashed. "Cole," he rasped, gripping her sleeve. "You're in charge." Her stomach clenched. "No, sir. Now." He barked, coughing blood. "Get them out." Then his eyes closed. Emma froze for half a second. Half a heartbeat. Then instinct took over. She grabbed his rifle, slung it over her shoulder, and shouted, "Everyone, fall back to the southern wall." "We regroup there." The tone in her voice cut through the chaos like a blade. The soldiers obeyed without hesitation. Tanner and Lopez provided cover while Emma led them through the smoke and debris. She could hear her pulse in her ears, feel the grit of sand on her teeth. Every movement was automatic. "Lopez, suppress left ridge." She yelled. "Tanner, smoke grenades on my mark." "Mark!" The smoke screen bloomed white across the battlefield, giving them precious seconds to move. Emma led them to a natural trench near the southern wall of the canyon. "Ammo check," she ordered. "Half mags left." Lopez called. "Down to 1." Tanner said. Emma took a deep breath. "We hold here. They'll come down to finish us. When they do, we make every bullet count." Her voice didn't waver. Not once. Minutes passed. The enemy fire slowed, replaced by movement, shadows descending from the ridges. Emma steadied her rifle, sighted the lead attacker, and whispered to herself, "Not today." She fired. The shot dropped the first man instantly. Then chaos erupted again. Her squad fired beside her, each shot echoing in the confined canyon. Emma's commands were sharp, clear, unshakable. She called targets, shifted angles, and even while bullets sliced the air inches from her head, she never faltered. When it was over, the ground was littered with silence again. Smoke drifted like ghosts through the trench. Lopez exhaled shakily. "They're down." "All of them." Tanner looked at Emma, eyes wide. "You just led that like you've been doing it for years." She lowered her weapon slowly. "We did what we had to." Behind her, the rising sun cast long shadows through the smoke, and in that light, Emma Cole didn't look like the quiet recruit anymore. She looked like a leader. The wind carried the scent of gunpowder and scorched earth across the canyon. The echo of gunfire still hung faintly in the air, fading into the harsh whisper of desert wind. Private First Class Emma Cole crouched beside Sergeant Daniels, her gloves slick with sand and blood. His chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. "Stay with me, Sergeant," she whispered, pressing gauze against the wound just below his ribs. His eyelids fluttered. "Cole, report." She swallowed hard. Ambush neutralized. Enemy squad eliminated. Daniels tried to smirk, but it came out as a grimace. "Knew you'd pull it off. Save your strength," she said. He coughed weakly. "No. Listen." His hand grabbed her wrist, still strong despite the blood loss. "You're in command now. You hear me? Till I'm back on my feet." Her throat tightened. "Sir, you'll—" "Don't argue," he rasped. "You've got instincts the rest of us don't. Use them." He released her hand and went still. He wasn't gone, just unconscious, but that didn't make it easier. Behind her, Tanner and Lopez were reloading, their hands trembling slightly from adrenaline. "Cole," Tanner called. "He's stable?" "Barely," she said. "We need to get him back to base." Lopez glanced at the wrecked MRAP, half buried in smoke. "That's not happening. Engines toast?" Emma scanned the ridges. "Radio?" "Dead," Tanner replied. "Signals jammed tight." She took a deep breath. "Then we're walking." Lopez's eyes widened. "Through that desert? We'll roast before we make it halfway." She met his gaze. "Then we move before the sun's high." There was something in her tone, calm but unyielding, that quieted every argument. Tanner nodded slowly. "You heard her. Grab what you can carry." They moved out just as the first rays of morning turned the sand a pale gold. Daniels was on a makeshift stretcher, his breathing shallow but steady. The desert was vast, endless dunes, shimmering heat, no landmarks but the sky itself. The nearest friendly outpost was 15 miles south. They had to move fast, and they had to stay invisible. Emma took point, navigating with nothing but instinct, and a compass clipped to her vest. Every few minutes she scanned the horizon, looking for movement. The silence between them was heavy, filled with exhaustion and the hum of fear. Lopez finally broke it. "Cole, how are you this calm? We just walked through hell." She didn't turn. "I'm not calm, I just don't let it show." Tanner chuckled softly. "Remind me never to get on your bad side." That earned the faintest ghost of a smile from her. By noon, the heat became unbearable. The metal on their weapons seared through gloves, and sweat rolled down their faces in thick lines. They paused in the shadow of a crumbling outcrop, taking sips from canteens that were already half empty. Lopez collapsed onto the sand, panting. "We're not going to make it at this pace." "We will," Emma said quietly. He looked up at her. "You actually believe that?" She met his eyes. "I have to." Tanner handed her the binoculars. "Movement. South Ridge. 2 clicks out." Emma lifted the binoculars, scanning the horizon. At first, all she saw was heat distortion. Then, a shimmer of figures moving low across the sand. She tensed, not friendly. Lopez cursed. "How many?" 6, maybe 8. Tracking us." Tanner's jaw clenched. They must have followed the smoke. Emma's mind raced. They couldn't fight, not with Daniels down and their ammo low. She studied the terrain. The ridge. To the west was steep, but it led into a series of canyons, perfect for losing pursuit. "Change of route," she said. "We head west. Double pace." They didn't question her. They just moved. The canyons were narrow and jagged, carved by ancient floods. Shadows fell across them like stripes. Every step echoed, reminding them how exposed they were. Emma signaled for a halt. "We'll rest here." Lopez set perimeter. Tanner, water check. As they worked, she knelt beside Daniels again. His face was pale, his lips dry. She poured a few drops of water onto his tongue and adjusted the bandage on his side. "You're not dying on me," she murmured. When she looked up, Tanner was watching her. "You've done more for him than most officers would." She shrugged. "He'd do the same." Tanner smiled faintly. "Maybe, but I don't think he'd do it this quietly." She almost laughed. Almost. They didn't get much rest. Within the hour, the sound of voices echoed faintly from deeper in the canyon, distant but getting closer. Lopez swore under his breath. "They're tracking us." Emma scanned the rocks. There was no way to outrun them with Daniels in tow. They needed to disappear. "Into the caves," she said, pointing toward a narrow gap in the cliff face. Tanner hesitated. "You sure? Could be a dead end?" "Then it's a dead end they won't find." They slipped into the gap, dragging the stretcher carefully behind them. Inside, the air was cooler, the walls damp and smooth. The cave twisted deep into the rock until they found a chamber wide enough to rest. Emma set Daniels down gently, then motioned for silence. The muffled sound of boots echoed faintly from outside. The enemy was close, maybe 30 yards away. Tanner whispered, "They're sweeping the canyon." Emma raised a finger to her lips. The voices grew louder. Flashlights flickered at the entrance of the cave. Lopez's breathing quickened. "They're going to find us." Emma's eyes darted around the chamber, her gaze fixed on a narrow tunnel branching off to the right, barely big enough to crawl through. She gestured silently. "Go. Now." Tanner shook his head. "What about you?" "I'll draw them off." "Like hell," he hissed. She met his eyes. "That's an order." Before he could argue, she was gone, slipping toward the entrance, silent as a shadow. Outside, the enemy squad moved carefully, scanning the canyon walls. Emma waited behind a boulder, heartbeat steady, rifle ready. She picked her moment carefully, then fired a single shot into the air and sprinted across the ridge. The attackers shouted in alarm, chasing her. Bullets sparked off stone behind her as she darted between cover, zigzagging toward higher ground. She ducked behind a ledge and reloaded, counting. 6 enemies still on her trail. She could feel the tremor in her arms from exhaustion, but her aim was steady. She waited until the first enemy crested the ridge, then fired. 1 down. 2 more appeared. She dropped another with a quick double tap. The rest took cover, shouting in Arabic. Emma tossed a smoke grenade down the slope, filling the canyon with thick gray haze. Using the cover, she slipped sideways into another crevice, looping back toward the cave. When she finally reached the chamber again, Tanner's eyes widened. "You're insane," he whispered. "Maybe," she said, catching her breath. "But it worked." Lopez grinned shakily. "You sure you weren't special forces in another life?" She managed a smirk. "Just observant." Hours later, night fell over the desert. The canyon grew quiet again. They built a small fire in the cave, hidden from view. The light flickered across tired faces. Soot, sweat, blood, and something else. Trust. Tanner leaned back against the wall. "You realize you're officially running this show now." "I'm not," she said softly. "Just until Daniels wakes up." Lopez shook his head. "Doesn't matter. You kept us alive when everything went to hell. That counts." She stared into the fire. The flames danced, their light catching the dust in the air. "Keeping people alive is just the beginning." Tanner frowned. "What do you mean?" She looked up, her eyes steady. "Whoever set these ambushes, they're not random. They're tracking our movements. Testing us." Lopez sighed. "You think they're coming again?" Emma's voice was calm, almost too calm. No, I know they are. Outside, far beyond the canyon, in the darkness of the dunes, 6 more vehicles moved silently, headlights off, engines low. The men inside were the same markings as those Emma had just fought. Their leader held a radio, listening to a voice that crackled in static. "Tomorrow," the voice said, "at dawn. Finish what they started." In the cave, Emma couldn't hear them, but she felt it. The pressure in the air, the sense that the desert wasn't finished with them yet. She tightened her grip on her rifle and looked at the others. "Get some rest. We move before sunrise." Tanner frowned. "Where?" She gazed toward the canyon's mouth, where a faint line of starlight touched the sand. "Toward the storm," she said quietly, and in that moment, every soldier in the cave, exhausted, wounded, half-broken, believed they would follow her anywhere. The night in the canyon was suffocating. Wind rattled through the narrow crevices, carrying with it the scent of dust, gunpowder, and sweat. Private First Class Emma Cole sat with her back against a rock, eyes scanning the shadows beyond the firelight. Sergeant Daniels was still unconscious, but breathing steadily. Tanner and Lopez huddled nearby, their faces pale and drawn. Even in the dark, Emma could feel their tension, fear masked as obedience. She didn't flinch. Leadership was now hers, whether she wanted it or not. And every instinct in her body told her that the enemy wasn't done. "Cole," Tanner whispered, breaking the silence. "You really think they're coming back?" She didn't answer immediately. Her gaze lingered on the canyon's mouth, where the dunes spilled into darkness. The desert had a way of hiding threats in plain sight. Finally, she spoke. "They're coming at dawn. Count on it." Lopez exhaled sharply. "Dawn? That's hours away. How are we supposed to hold them off?" "You follow my lead. That's all." She checked her weapon once more, then moved silently to check Daniels. He stirred slightly, groaning. She pressed her fingers to his pulse, steady but weak. "Stay down," she whispered. "You'll be fine. Just rest." Then she returned to the entrance of the cave, scanning the ridge lines, noting every shadow, every glint of metal. By sunrise, they had to be ready, and she had no illusions about the danger ahead. The hours passed in tense silence. Every small noise, the scrape of a rock, a distant howl, made them flinch. Emma kept her mind sharp, rehearsing plans for every scenario. "Cole," Tanner said finally, breaking another pause, "what's our fallback if they breach the canyon?" She tilted her head, calculating. "We'll split. Lopez and I take the east flank. Tanner, you cover the west. Daniel stays central. He's our anchor." Tanner frowned. "He's barely conscious. He'll hold. If anyone can, it's him." Lopez looked at her with wide eyes. "And you?" "I move where I'm needed most." Her calm voice gave them courage, even though her heart raced. She knew the desert wouldn't wait for fear. At first light, the horizon began to glow red. The wind carried a hint of smoke from distant fires, and Emma's instinct screamed they were moving in. "Positions," she ordered, signaling with hand gestures. The squad moved like shadows, slipping to the edges of rocks, behind boulders, into shallow depressions. Emma positioned herself near the central ridge, giving her a clear line of sight to the canyon mouth. Her rifle was loaded, her scope ready, grenades secured. Every muscle coiled like a spring. The first movement came at the far edge of the dunes. Dust kicked up as 6 figures appeared, crouched low, moving in coordinated formation. Emma's pulse didn't quicken. She was already calculating. Distance, cover, angles, timing. "Wait for my mark," she whispered. The enemy advanced cautiously. They had rifles, sidearms, and grenades, clearly trained for ambushes. Emma could see them scanning for signs of life. One careless movement could trigger chaos, and she intended to control that chaos. "Now," she shouted. Her rifle barked. The first enemy fell, head snapping back against the sand. Two more went down in quick succession, suppressed fire from Lopez and Tanner hitting the next flank. The attackers froze, exchanging shouts in Arabic. Emma adjusted her aim and fired again, a controlled burst that dropped one man behind a dune. The battle was brutal, fast, and disorienting. Dust, smoke, and sand whipped through the canyon. Shouts, gunfire, and the crack of rifles echoed off the rock walls. Tanner's .50 cal flared, suppressing the enemy's left side. Lopez tossed smoke grenades, creating chaos that Emma exploited. She moved fluidly between cover, taking out targets with precision, her calm energy radiating to the others. "Cover me," she shouted to Lopez as she advanced. Two enemies were trying to flank them. With a practiced motion, she dropped one, then the second, all while under fire. "Holy," Lopez gasped. "Cole, you're unreal." Emma didn't respond. There was no time for ego. Survival depended on focus. The enemy regrouped, attempting to gain higher ground on the ridges. Emma spotted their leader, a tall man with a black scarf around his neck, directing fire. He was competent, experienced, and dangerous. She didn't hesitate. She sighted him through her scope, waited for a clean line of fire, and took the shot. He went down instantly. Without their leader, the attackers faltered. Confusion spread among them. Emma seized the moment, signaling Tanner and Lopez to push forward. They advanced carefully, clearing enemy positions while keeping Daniels in the center, anchored safely. By mid-morning, the enemy had retreated, leaving their dead and injured behind. The canyon, once a battlefield of chaos, fell silent again. Emma lowered her rifle, her chest heaving. Tanner and Lopez looked at her with awe. "Cole," Tanner whispered, voice trembling, "you saved all of us." "I didn't save anyone alone," she said softly. "We all made it because we worked together." Lopez shook his head. "You don't get it. You led us. When everything was falling apart, you didn't hesitate. You're not just a recruit, you're a soldier." After the battle, they tended to the wounded. Daniels was groggy, but alive. His chest bandaged, he leaned against a boulder, nodding at Emma. "You did well," he said simply. Emma shook her head. "We did well. You would have pulled through if I hadn't acted." Daniels smirked faintly. "Acting isn't enough out here. You've got instinct, Cole, and guts. That's a rare combination." The squad moved cautiously back toward base. The desert, which had seemed endless and threatening, now held a strange peace. Emma's mind was still alert, scanning for movement, calculating paths, predicting danger. She realized then that the desert had changed her. Every step through the canyon, every shot fired, every decision made under fire had honed her, sharpened her instincts, and prepared her for the unimaginable. Back at FOB Falcon, word of the dawn battle spread fast. Soldiers from other units came to the mess hall, whispering about the quiet recruit who had led her squad to survival. Emma didn't celebrate. She cleaned her weapons methodically as always. Tanner clapped her shoulder. "You're a legend now, Cole. People are going to be talking about this for months." She glanced up at him. "Legends don't survive in the desert. They adapt." Daniels watched from his bunk, wincing as he adjusted his bandages. "Adapted enough to get the whole squad home today," he said. Emma nodded, her eyes scanning the horizon. She knew the desert wouldn't let them rest for long. Tomorrow would bring new threats, new ambushes, and perhaps more impossible choices. But for now, she allowed herself a brief moment of stillness. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was leading, and she would do whatever it took to keep them alive. The desert sun rose like fire over Fob Falcon, casting long shadows across the base. Emma Cole stood at the edge of the camp, rifle slung over her shoulder, surveying the horizon. The past weeks had been brutal: ambushes, patrols, night marches, and firefights that tested every ounce of courage in her squad. The weight of leadership sat heavily on her shoulders. Daniels had returned to limited duty, but for all practical purposes, Emma was in command now, and the enemy had taken notice. Command intercepted intelligence reports. A squad of highly trained insurgents was moving toward Red Corridor. Their orders were clear: eliminate Falcon's patrols, disrupt supply lines, and sow fear. Emma didn't flinch. She had anticipated this. "Cole," Daniel said from behind, leaning on his crutch. "Intel says they're good, experienced. Don't underestimate them." Emma shook her head. "I don't intend to. We'll be ready." Her squad gathered quietly around her: Tanner, Lopez, and a handful of others. No one spoke unnecessarily. Each soldier trusted her implicitly. Emma's voice was calm but commanding. "This is it. We move in tight formation. Stay silent until I give the order. We control the valley, not them. And remember, every shot counts." By mid-morning, the squad was moving into the valley once more. The canyon stretched ahead, ominous and quiet. Emma led from the front, her eyes scanning every ridge, every crevice. The desert was alive with tension. "They know we're coming," Tanner muttered. Emma didn't respond. Her instincts screamed: patience, observation, timing. Suddenly, a shadow shifted on the northern ridge, movement too precise to be random. "Enemy spotted," she whispered. 2 clicks north, ridge positions. Spread out. Silent approach. Lopez's hands shook slightly. Silent? After what they did before. Emma met his gaze. "We adapt, like always. Follow my lead." The squad moved carefully, every step measured. Emma counted 4 enemy fighters atop the ridge. They were alert, disciplined, scanning for movement below. Emma signaled with her hand. Tanner and Lopez fanned out along the sides, creating overlapping fields of cover. She inched forward, crouching behind a boulder that gave her perfect sight. She studied them, memorizing patterns, the way they shifted, how often they adjusted their sights, when they scanned left or right. Timing would be everything. Her breath slowed, heart steady. She recalled every firefight she had survived, every shot, every movement, every life saved. This time it was personal. Emma's finger hovered over the trigger. Then she acted. A single round flew, precise, fatal. One enemy went down silently, collapsing against the ridge. The others spun, confusion rippling through their formation. "Now," she hissed to her squad. Tanner's .50 cal erupted, suppressing the ridge. Lopez tossed smoke grenades, creating a wall of gray mist. Emma moved forward with deadly precision, firing controlled bursts. 2 more insurgents fell before they could return fire. The last one, the apparent leader, ducked behind a large boulder. Emma advanced carefully, every movement calculated, silent. She lobbed a grenade just ahead of his cover. The blast rocked the ridge. Before he could react, Emma was on him. Her rifle pressed against his chest. A single shot ended the threat. Silence fell. The enemy squad, trained, disciplined, and deadly, was neutralized by the quiet recruit who had refused to speak much, but whose actions had spoken volumes. Her squad approached, stunned by what they had witnessed. "Cole," Lopez whispered, voice shaking. You took out the whole squad by yourself." Emma lowered her rifle, keeping her expression calm. We all played our parts. I just took the shot that counted. Tanner shook his head. Shot that counted? That was a perfect ambush. You just made the impossible look easy. She allowed herself a small smile. Impossible is relative. Daniels, who had arrived to support the extraction, watched from a distance, still leaning heavily on his crutch. His expression was a mixture of pride and awe. You've done something remarkable, Cole, he said quietly. Not just for the squad, not just for the base, for everyone who hears about this. You've set a standard no one will forget. Emma shrugged, brushing sand from her uniform. I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because it had to be done. Because people depended on me. The squad cleared the area, securing the ridge and recovering enemy weapons and intel. Every action Emma gave was precise. She directed her soldiers with a calm authority that drew out their best, even in exhaustion and fear. When they returned to FOB Falcon, word had already spread. Soldiers and officers alike whispered about the quiet recruit who had taken on an entire enemy squad alone and won. For Emma, it was just another day in the desert. She cleaned her rifle methodically, the hum of generators the only background noise. Tanner leaned against the wall. Cole, people are calling you a legend. Emma didn't look up. I'm just a soldier. Lopez laughed softly. A soldier who just became a legend. Daniels approached, still bandaged and bruised. Quiet recruit, huh? You're anything but quiet now. Emma met his gaze. I've always been quiet. I just speak when action demands it. He nodded. Then consider this, your voice heard loud and clear. That evening, as the sun dipped below the dunes, Emma walked alone along the edge of the base. She thought about the soldiers she had led, the battles survived, and the lives saved. Every moment, every decision had weighed heavily on her. Yet, through it all, she had adapted, survived, and emerged stronger. The desert had tested her, fire had forged her, and leadership had defined her. A breeze carried the faint sound of distant chatter and laughter from the base, soldiers celebrating their safety, unaware of the precise moments that had kept them alive. Emma allowed herself a rare smile. She knew this was only the beginning. There would be more battles, more impossible situations, more tests of skill and instinct. But Emma Cole, the quiet recruit, had proven something fundamental. Courage isn't loud. Leadership isn't about words. True power, true heroism, is in the actions that speak for themselves. She would never seek fame. But the desert, the squad, and history had already spoken her name. And from that day forward, every soldier who heard the story knew, when the quiet recruit steps forward, she doesn't just survive. She dominates. She had taken out an entire enemy squad alone. She had led her squad through chaos and death. She had become a legend. And she was just getting started. The story ends with Emma standing tall against the sunset, rifle in hand, quiet determination etched into her features. The desert stretches endlessly before her. A challenge, a battleground, a proving ground. And Emma Cole is ready for it all.